welcome to our 176th online gathering for faith leaders across the country. This regular gathering is called Courageous Leadership, and it's sponsored by ELCA's coaching ministry. I'm Jill Beverlin. I use the pronouns she, her, and I am the Director of Coaching Ministries for the ELCA. I'm blessed to be one of your facilitators today. So as is our habit, we are naming our connection with the truth and healing movement of the ELCA, and we want to pause and offer a land acknowledgement. We encourage you to also consider engaging in this practice in your communities as a ritual part of any event that you host. And with this, I want you to know that I'm speaking with you from Appleton, Wisconsin, which is the ancestral homelands of 5 nations of Native Indigenous peoples: the Menominee tribe, the Ho-Chunk Winnebago tribe, the Potawatomi tribe, the Oneida tribe, and the Stockbridge-Munsee Band of Mohicans and the Brothertown community. I honor and respect the diverse Indigenous peoples connected to this land on which I live. Expanding this, we are each gathered in this virtual space from all parts of Turtle Island. Because we understand that all land is Indigenous land, I now invite each of you to name in the chat the Indigenous peoples or tribal nations who were the first to love and care for the lands and places where you are located. Along with this, it is important that we acknowledge all of our Indigenous siblings who continue to care for this land and call it their home. And if you are Indigenous, we invite you to name your people or tribal nation in the chat feature now so that we may see you more fully in this virtual space. Thank you, friends, for engaging in this practice. So through these gatherings, we have developed a covenant of how we enter and interact in this space. We are committed to creating a safer and braver space in these gatherings where we are able to bring the truth of who we are and how we are doing. And with all of this said, we proclaim that these conversations are meant to be an intentional step to live more fully into God's dream for us as the body of Christ. So again, welcome and happy Holy Week. Some of you were able to join us last week for the first workshop in healing-centered engagement. I believe that Jason has the recording of what was shared in that 2.5-hour time. And Jason, are we planning on posting that with this recording?
Yes, they gave us permission to share. So I'll be linking that with the recording from today.
Beautiful, beautiful. And that can be a resource for you to use as you continue to unpack some of what we are learning and hopefully more of the learnings that we will explore today. And we also want to name that if you were not able to attend last week, we have intentionally designed this time to be inclusive for everyone. It really is a moment for us to point to the concepts that were presented in that space, but we are really working to make sure that this is a time where everyone can interact with the subject matter and material. So before I turn things over to Jason, who will be our main presenter today on reviewing the subject matter, I want us to take a moment to center and ground ourselves in the presence of Spirit before we start. And so with that, I want to invite you, if it feels better for you, this is going to be a breathing exercise. And so if it's easier for you to be off camera as you do this, I invite you to find a way for you to feel comfortable. I encourage you, if you are able, to sit upright and be intentional about how you are placing your feet, maybe firmly on the floor. Next, I invite you to notice where you are placing your hands. Maybe you will support them in your lap. Maybe you will place them gently, palms down on your knees. Whatever feels natural and comfortable. And now, as you are breathing in and out, I encourage you to do so at a pace that is natural for you. As you breathe in, imagine bringing the very breath of God to your inmost being. Breathing out, imagine letting go of that which Spirit does not intend for you to hold or keep in this moment. Breathing in deeply, knowing that love, peace, and healing surround you. As you breathe out, imagine sharing your love, compassion, and kindness with the world. Breathing in, asking Spirit for new awareness of who we are, our past and present, and how our actions have shaped different peoples. Breathing out, acknowledging our connectedness to each creature and part of the earth, sending love and gratefulness to the ends of the earth. Breathing in, may you become aware of new insights lifted from our conversation and sharing that will happen this day. Breathing out, may you silently name the intentions that have been placed upon your heart in this moment. Breathing in, asking for a continued openness of heart and mind, and for Spirit to bring further awareness of truth. Breathing out, an intention to partner with all things and the sacred work of healing. And now, as we end this time of centering, I invite you to stay in a meditative space and posture as I read the words of author Robin Wall Kimmerer from Braiding Sweetgrass. And as you hear these words, may they shape your thoughts and actions in the coming days as we continue to walk through Holy Week. She writes, "The moral covenant of reciprocity calls us to honor our responsibility for all we have been given, for all that we have taken. It's our turn, now long overdue. Let us hold a giveaway for Mother Earth, spread our blankets out for her and pile them high with gifts of our own making. Imagine the books, the paintings, the poems, the clever machines, the compassionate acts, the transcendent ideas, the perfect tools, the fierce defense of all that has been given, gifts of mind, hands, heart, voice, and vision, all offered up on behalf of the earth and creation. Whatever our gift, we are called to give it and to dance for the renewal of the world." May this be our prayer. Amen. Thank you, friends. And Jason, welcome to the space.
Thank you, Jill. So just to note, I love how Spirit works with Jill and I sometimes when we talk about something a few days before and we go off and then bring, like, we don't really talk about what it's going to look like together. We just know we're going to bring our parts. And what Jill doesn't know, because we didn't talk about this, but that you brought Braiding Sweetgrass And the author, Shawn Ginwright, talks about how these four pivots, he sees them as a braid. So just in an interview, I heard him talk about it. But so as we talk about the pivots a little bit later today, none are more, like not one is more important than the other, but he sees them as a braid of four strands. So I just thought it was cool that you brought a reading from that was not something we talked about. So yay, spirit. Um, so what I'll be sharing today is a really high level, and we'll invite you to go deeper when we're in breakout rooms, as well as in future courageous leadership gatherings as we wrestle with and unpack the four pivots from Dr. Shawn Ginwright. So to start, I'd like to cover some context from the article we shared in our email invitation, and I will also share that with the recording from today. But I want to read some of Dr. Ginwright's words directly from him. And just so you know whether it's me or him talking, I will read until I change to the next slide. So you know these are his words. So I'm going to invite you to sit or stand or whatever works for you as far as listening well for a few minutes. Trauma-informed care broadly refers to a set of principles that guide and direct how we view the impact of severe harm on people's mental, physical, and emotional health. Trauma-informed care encourages support and treatment to the whole person, rather than focusing on only treating individual symptoms or specific behaviors. While trauma-informed care offers an important lens to support people who have been harmed and emotionally injured, it also has its limitations. I first became aware of the limitations of the term trauma-informed care during a healing circle I was leading with a group of African American young men. All of them had experienced some form of trauma, ranging from sexual abuse, violence, homelessness, abandonment, or all of the above. During one of our sessions, I explained the impact of stress and trauma on brain development and how trauma can influence emotional health. As I was explaining, one of the young men in the group, named Marcus, abruptly stopped me and said, "I am more than what happened to me. I'm not just my trauma." So for Marcus, the term trauma-informed care was akin to saying, "You are the worst thing that ever happened to you." And for me, I realized the term slipped into the murky water of deficit-based rather than asset-driven strategies to support people who have been harmed. So while the term trauma-informed care is important, it's incomplete. What is needed is an approach that allows practitioners to approach trauma with a fresh lens that promotes a holistic view of healing from traumatic experiences and environments. One approach is called healing-centered, as opposed to trauma-informed. A healing-centered approach is holistic, involving culture, spirituality, civic action, and collective healing. A healing-centered approach views trauma not simply as an individual, isolated experience, but rather highlights the ways in which trauma and healing are experienced collectively. The term healing-centered engagement expands how we think about responses to trauma and offers more holistic approach to fostering well-being. A shift from trauma-informed care to healing-centered engagement is more than a semantic play with words, but rather a tectonic shift in how we view trauma, its causes, and its intervention. Healing-centered engagement is strength-based, advances a collective view of healing, and recenters culture as a central feature in well-being. A healing-centered approach to addressing trauma requires a different question that moves beyond what happened to you to what's right with you, and views those exposed to trauma as agents in the creation of their own well-being rather than victims of traumatic events. Healing-centered engagement is akin to the South African term Ubuntu, meaning that humanness is found through our interdependence, collective engagement, and service to others. Additionally, healing-centered engagement offers an asset-driven approach aimed at the holistic restoration of people's well-being. The healing-centered approach comes from the idea that people are not harmed in a vacuum, and well-being comes from participating in transforming the root causes of the harm within institutions. One of the many powerful statements in Ginwright's book is this one: healing is the only pathway to real justice because it requires that we take an honest look at what harmed us and pushes us to restore our humanity and finally to move us confidently into a possible future. Side note, Jill and I love how all of this ties in with coaching, but that's a whole nother conversation. So despite what we've been told, the most critical mainspring of social change isn't coalition building or problem analysis. It's healing, deep, whole, and systemic, inside and out. Ginwright breaks down the common myths of social movements, a set of deeply ingrained beliefs that actually hold us back from healing and achieving sustainable systemic change. He shows us why these frames don't work, proposing instead 4 revolutionary pivots for better activism and collective leadership. So, supplemented with reflections, prompts, cutting edge research, and the author's own insights and lived experience as an African American social scientist, professor, and movement builder, the 4 pivots helps us uncover our obstruction points. It shows us how to discover new lenses and boldly assert our need for connection, transformation, trust, wholeness, and healing. So it gives us permission to create a better future, to acknowledge that a broken system has been predefining our dreams and limiting what we allow ourselves to imagine, but that it doesn't have to be that way at all. Are you ready to pivot? Dr. Brene Brown has this to say. In his brave new book, The 4 Pivots, Reimagining Justice, Reimagining Ourselves, Shawn Ginwright asks a simple but profound question. Can we heal the world without healing ourselves? I'm going to say that again. Can we heal the world without healing ourselves? Brene goes on to say, I've always believed the answer is no, but I've never seen anyone propose a more daring solution than what's in this book and conversation, which we hope to start today with y'all. There is so much wisdom in these 4 pivots. So does this sound like a commercial yet? Our intent is just to provide enough context to lead us into conversations in breakout rooms and to set up the 4 pivots for future discussions. So I do want us to look at those briefly. And again, for reimagining justice and reimagining ourselves, I love that language. And so the 4 pivots are awareness, connection, vision, and presence. And we'll actually look at those in a different order. He talks about, again, there's no specific order, but I want to invite you to view them differently as well. Same thing as the order they present in the workshop. Like we may do it in a different order from them just to kind of keep things fresh. But awareness, from lens to mirror, connection, from transactional to transformative relationships, vision, from problem fixing to possibility creating. Again, does any of this sound like coaching? And presence, from hustle to flow. So we will cover each of these more in depth in future Courageous Leadership gatherings, so stay tuned. And for others who attended last week's Advancing Equity online workshop, what else did you notice or hear in the larger context of healing-centered engagement that might be helpful for the group before we move into breakout rooms? And I will stop my screen share so I can see everybody. Ooh, does that mean I did a good job summarizing?
Or maybe, Jason, we can even invite people just to name a word or a concept that has stuck with them since attending last week.
Yeah, we're flexible with what this looks like today.
In my notes that I have written down, I have the word or the phrase space holders. We are space
Hmm.
holders. And that really stuck with me too. And what does the larger question, I think, is what is space? Brave space, safe space, courageous space.
Hmm.
What does it mean to be a space holder?
Yeah. Thank you, Andrea.
Mhm.
I love that. In one of the coach trainings I'm leading, we talked about finding safe places versus creating brave spaces. So just, playing with language, but yeah, trying to figure out like, yeah, where are we called in each relationship? Because it might look different in different places or with different people, right? Yeah. So I love your wonderings with that too. Jen.
I actually had to miss the class, but I looked at the slides and I had written down one of the slides talking about how important well-being, balance, and inner alignment is to being able to do the good work of social justice. So it seemed like the self-care and the mindfulness that struck me.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we'll be talking about that with one of the pivots in particular. I believe it's the presence one, um, and around how our culture especially talks a lot about self-care. We've done that for decades. The problem is we usually forget community is connected to almost every single self-care type thing out there. So it's just interesting the language we use. Um, so I've heard it framed as community care, and I mean there are other ways we can toy with that language, but um, in our very individualistic culture, we also want to make sure we're also in community, and that's what I love about these pivots too. It really highlights how it's the both and, which as Lutherans we're really good at, and so there's a lot of that in these pivots. Jane.
One thing that I appreciated was under the awareness one and looking at moving from being a lens to a mirror, and just to talk about intersecting identities, which let people speak to any factor in their life that was part of what they were holding, and
Mhm.
that's also fluid. So at one point you may have people in your home that you're caring for, or our circumstances change. And so I love the holistic sense and feeling invited to a conversation where I can see all parts of my life and just hold it all. So that was great. Thanks.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you, Jane.
Jason, I'm going to name that I was very excited to learn about this book.
Hmm.
And I'm so excited about the Four Pivots book that I would like to offer one to everyone in this space. And so I'm just going to automatically send you one unless I hear otherwise from you. I've already written down your names, and I think I've sent everyone in this space a resource before. So I think I have your mailing address too. So if I don't, I'll reach out to you. But I just feel that these concepts are so important to how we are in leadership with one another,
Hmm.
and the beauty of how they organically come right alongside coaching, the tenets of coaching that we teach to, that we coach to. It's a beautiful combination. And Jason, I don't know if we said out loud that we became aware of these workshops through our colleague Vance Blackbox. You know, Vance was the one that sent us this information, and it makes complete sense because everything that they were teaching, I was like, it feels like Vance is the one speaking right now. Yeah, so a big shout out to our colleague Vance as well.
Yeah, thank you, Jill. That reminds me too, you and I talked about how for anybody who's been through our segment 1 basic skills coach training in the last few years, that was created from Don Eisenhower through the lens of grief coaching, end of life coaching, loss, etc., how healing centered those ICF things are presented. It was just an interesting noticing as we were sort of talking. So I don't know, it feels like spirit saying, hey, there is more here. So Jill and I are, yeah, hopefully paying attention, and hopefully you feel invited along, and yeah, we will see what's here for us as a faith community. Do folks want to do breakout rooms for a little bit? A little more intimate conversations? Yeah? All right. We're using the questions they actually used because I love the framing, but it's very similar to what we've asked sometimes. But thinking about our bodies, we also love the connection to the body of Christ. But head, what have you learned? What's something you learned today? What is something you're feeling? And what's a commitment you're making? That's our, what's your most faithful or next most faithful step? Is usually how we ask it, but I like this too.
You had such a smile, Mukesh, when you came back. I loved it. Oh, and you're muted, friend.
I was gonna say I was with a bunch of rock stars. That's the word for the day for me.
Oh, you're all ready to unpack. Rock star. Yes.
Love it.
Excellent.
Who would
Jason,
like-
please lead
Yeah.
us in our debrief.
Who would like to share? What did you hear? What did you notice?
I didn't share this in my group, but what is something that you're feeling
Hmm.
is a resonance. Like when you hear truth, for me, when I feel like I hear truth, it resonates. And so, yeah, through all our discussions, through what you shared with us, Jason, it's like it's just like that sitting like, oh yeah, this is, yeah, this is truth.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah, Jill and I experienced some similar feelings when we were talking, unpacking last week's. We were like, oh, there might be something here. Spirit might be like, hey, are you paying attention?
Yeah. Well, and something we haven't talked about is the intersection between this language and gospel. It's like we're used to being out in the world of change and mental health and social activism, and often it is all in language that is entirely secular. And that's helpful because we can speak across traditions. But I hunger for I will say preaching first that helps me connect the gospel, to this work, that this is not just some political party or some good thing to do. This is gospel living. And so to connect those concepts and terms like grace, where's their room in all of this? So, yeah, that's just a deep hunger in me.
Yeah, thank you, Jane. That is something Jill and I actually already dreamed a little bit about, like how do we bring this in with those 4 pivots, especially when we unpack those, because they do feel very connected to the gospel. So yeah, we'll be, I think, just if nothing else, experimenting and playing with that a little bit to see what resonates for people.
So I shared with our group when I was here last Wednesday that as the presenter was presenting the very first part where she had asked each one to remember their ancestors and to throw or give something or remind them, I share with my group. That's how and still what Hindus do. My Hinduism, we still do that. We have, and I didn't share this with our small group, but we have picture frames of our grandparents and our great grandparents with the images of the Hindus gods together. And so you pray and you worship. I think part of that was a presentation last week, where they throw water in remembrance of their ancestors. Hindus still do that. So lots of what I've heard last week was part of my Hinduism growing up. And I encourage others, not for belief purpose per se, but just to learn of what others are doing. So beside even traditions, they have religious beliefs that are so much in commonality. Talking about Jane with connection with the gospel, I mean, everything in life is gospel. This is how I see it. Everything in life is gospel. So when you're talking about awareness, um, Jesus tells us, spend time with yourself, get yourself, go take Sabbath. It's for yourself. When we are talking about community, well, God created all of the whole creation and then said, well, wait a minute here. We need someone to take care of this. And then one female, one male, and they said, well, multiply. And we are created to live in community. That's gospel, not individual and put fence up, by yourself, things like that. The gospel again is when one part of the body is hurting, the rest is hurting. Where there's no justice for all people, everyone suffer. So everything, I would say, it's all connected with the gospel. If we can just, so that's one of the things I can share with you that I have learned.
Thank you, Mukesh. I don't know if you noticed, I have the cocoa background up today, so I love that you were mentioning it because I know it's big in Latine culture too, as far as having ancestors and remembering them.
Well, one of the scripture readings from today, if you look at the lectionary, is Hebrews, and that we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses. So that's what they say. The thread of truth continues to go no matter where it is.
Melissa, I'm glad that you mentioned that. One of my practices is I used to pray the Office of the Hours, and an Episcopalian priest that I'm connected with shared with me this particular book. It's the Benedictine Daily Prayer, a short breviary. And so right now we're in, of course, the Holy Week, and in the Office of Lauds, consistently around the calendar year, there is a space to intentionally remember our departed brothers and sisters, and to name each one that you care to out loud. Let them rejoice in your love forever and ever. That was the reading, and centered on that today. So Mukesh, it's interesting to hear that that's part of the practice with the Hindus, because here is a Christian resource where there's something very, very similar, and that aspect of truth, Melissa, and how that's running through. It's just all, I'm just fascinated by all of this in this moment.
I may, how does it feel right now, Jill, to shift to that short video clip? And then we can, okay, I just want to make sure we have enough time. I have a minute and a half indigenous wisdom that we feel like connects to this as well, that I would love to share. All right.
Something coming up a lot for folks is they are stuck in their overwhelm and grief, and I wanted to offer some Indigenous solutions to colonial problems. Mine come from the Moana Lassi, from Tuvalu, and from many lands and healers and knowledge keepers around the world. One of the things I'm doing to support myself and other people is that when I'm watching images of unimaginable loss and pain, I'm taking a moment to thank my exquisite sensitivities for reminding me of my humanity. I would much rather feel this much pain than be numb to this kind of suffering. And that makes me feel really grateful. The second thing I want to offer is that my understanding of grief is that it is love with nowhere to go. And when I'm looking at these images that are making me feel so angry, and underneath that anger is grief, and underneath that grief is love. And so when I trace my grief to the love underneath, I can give that somewhere to go. I can go out into my community. I can care for people. If you live in a settler colony, there is no shortage of suffering around you, and we can go and spend that love somewhere. Settler colonialism thrives on fear and separation. And so every time we have faith and every time we lean in for connection, we are resisting this system. So I wanted to remind us this because when we do our resistance in this way, in this generative way, it keeps our bodies safer, our communities stronger, and it means we can keep it up for a lifetime.
Good stuff, right? Seeing a lot of nodding heads. I'll put her Instagram handle in the chat if you want to follow her if you're on Instagram.
Jason, if I may, I just would love to hear one word from everyone in the room as we leave, even if that word is a form of blessing that we're offering to one another in this space and to the people that would be listening to this recording. This feels so important, this aspect of work. So thank you for being willing to engage it with us. David, I'm going to start with you. And if you want to pass, just give it away. You don't have to say a word.
I think I'll say peace.
Thank you. Andrea.
Intentionality.
Pastor Jane. You are muted, my friend.
Resiliency.
Thank you. Melissa.
Awe.
Jen.
Hope.
Sylvia.
That is profound.
Jane.
There is enough.
Mukesh.
Peace and hope.
Jason.
It was Leah's word, generative.
Generative. So friends, my word is expansive. This work has just shown me the expansiveness of the work that we do together in this space. As you leave today, friends, and journey to the cross and then to the empty tomb, may you know that you are seen, you are valued, and you are so deeply loved. Happy Holy Week. God bless you.
And so are you.
Yes, and so are you.
Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye, friends.